Hey everyone, this is Gigi here with more artistic funness. Today's tutorial is on understanding light source in graphite sketching, and I'll be covering that subject briefly using some existing character art. But first I'll give you a tidbit. Years ago, in my one art class, I had drawn a pumpkin sitting in an open field with the sun shining, it was all pretty. But when I added the shading, the shadow was facing the sun as opposed to on the opposite side of the pumpkin. So my art teacher was like, yeah, you need to put the shadow on the opposite side. If the sun's over here, which in my case was on the right side of the page, the shadow should have been on the left side of the pumpkin. So I learned my lesson that day, and so now I take a lot of painstaking measures to ensure that my shading is as realistic as possible. In my previous video, I quickly covered light source and drawing with basic shapes. But I'm going to go a little more in-depth with it today in this particular video. Sorry for the fuzzes. So we're going to start off with this sketch here. Now, in these sketches, it's always good to imagine what kind of environment and lighting your character is standing in. For instance, Donatello from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is standing outside. Let's get a closer look at that. Now, for instance, he's going to be standing in the rain in this drawing. There's kind of some wind, and you can kind of see his bandana tails blowing around. It's also a very dimly lit environment that he's in. And with dimly lit environment, so think of like a cloudy day, it's raining, there's drops on his hat there, over there. Okay, so we're going to get started with that. Now, since we're in a dimly lit environment with this character, we want to start with a midtone. Midtones are always important when starting off your shading, especially with characters that are solid black. In this case, we have a purple, so we're going to make this, I guess, a purple in grayscale, if you want to call it that. Okay, now while I'm doing the midtone, I try to start forming where the shading is going to be, so you'll be seeing that in a second. Okay. Now that I've completed the first step of the shading process, we're going to start off again with the skin. We're going to do a lighter midtone. Now you can see where I'm starting to apply different pressures. Definitely not on the nose. There's the lightest pressure on the nose, and then there's more pressure on the side of the face where I'm imagining my shading to be. Okay. Now here, more of the shading is going to be on that side of the face, so that's starting to indicate where our light source is coming from. Now the light is a little more straight on, not exactly off to the side, so who knows where he's standing at this point. So our light source is coming from over there. It'll be a street lamp or a street light. Okay. Now as we go, we're going to start doing the bandana part now. I always try to do my drawings little bit by little bit. Okay. This way I can understand where I'm going with the whole thing, and if I need to make corrections, I can do it. Instead of covering a large area with your pencil, always go for smaller areas. And the reason I say smaller areas is so that you get a finer grain when you're doing your graphite sketching, as opposed to covering large areas, which will give you something kind of rough looking and not so nice. Plus, it's easier to correct mistakes when you cover smaller areas as opposed to large areas. Now, I could go on and on in this whole video about shading and this and that, but the one other basic element I want to cover in my next clip is shading with black and how to start that off with midtones. So here we have a sketch of Cynthia Skunk, who is, of course, a all-black character. Now, the one thing I've gotten out of the habit of is starting directly with black whenever I do either digital or graphite sketching, and I find it's always better to start with midtones when you want something that's more realistic, and it works great with doing the eyelashes and the nose. So here we go. Watch my speedy graphite sketching. So now that that's out of the way, we can
figure out where our light source is coming from, which is on the left-hand side. So imagine it's a nice day in the woods and it's sunny out. Now what you can also do is you can take your handy dandy gummy eraser, or kneadable eraser if you want to call it that. Just kind of knead it so that it makes a little point or whatever for fine erasing. And you can just gently lift off the color off the page. But since there's not that much light, I don't want to do that, so we'll just color that back in. Okay, now we continue, and this is where I start adding more pressure, so we can start getting the impression of black. And what I like to do by the eyes is add just a tiny bit of shading to indicate, hey, there's a slight indent, I guess. I don't know, I've never really studied that in real life too much, but there we have it. Now this is going to look a little weird as we go, but that's going to happen with any drawing that you do. So for instance, there's always going to be a little bit of shading on the snout, always where the mouth is. Okay, you never want really a solid line defining the mouth. You want to make sure your shading is done in a way that it indicates realism. Now, as a final note, in closing out this tutorial, I want to show you some finished sketches of graphite characters, I guess, or just characters in graphite. This is a series I started of Turtle Tots, starting with Donatello, little Donatello. I don't know how old he is, he's probably 4 or 5, but he's looking all cute. A lot of times you're not going to put a shine in the eye when you're doing these kinds of projects, so just keep that in mind. Here we can see a prime example of our light source. The whole right side of the page is very white. But a lot of times when I do these character sketches, since I already know where my light source is going to be, I just start doing the character right away, and then I add the background later. To me, it's more practical because you get more of the character's form in, as opposed to being like, oh crap, I gotta erase all this background stuff. Ugh, I don't want to do that. So that's what I do with those, is that I start with the character first, and then I go to the background and do that. It's probably backwards, but I don't care. That's the method I use. That's what works for me. Here you can see a shine in the eyes for little Michelangelo, which I'm going to do a tutorial on eyes next time, or I don't know when I'm going to do one. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how to do proper lighting in the eyes. I mean, I remember in my one art class we were doing eyes, and some of these people could not draw eyes to save their lives. Alright, so that wraps up this tutorial for today, and I will see you in the next video. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions or requests for future videos, leave a comment and be sure to hit that wonderful subscribe button. Updates are every other Tuesday. See you all then!